Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. The Biden administration has implemented travel restrictions on 8 South African nations because of the new Omicron variant, which no one knows yet if it's even dangerous. And the president himself says Omicron, but that's later. So here is the president at this news conference today, taking the opportunity to tell you something that you haven't yet heard, which is to get vaccinated. Watch.
The best protection, I know you're tired of hearing me say this, the best protection against this new variant or any of the variants out there, the ones we've been dealing with already, is getting fully vaccinated and getting a booster shot. Most Americans are fully vaccinated, but not yet boosted. Do not wait. Go get your booster if it's time for you to do so. And if you are not vaccinated, now's the time to get vaccinated and take your children to be vaccinated.
So get vaccinated, even though it doesn't transfer immunity. And wear your mask indoors, says the president, who was recently caught not wearing his mask indoors. Because we have to keep this pandemic going, and we need fear to do it. And besides, the president says, if we do that, we can avoid locking down. For now, anyway. Watch.
Are lockdowns off the table?
Yes, for now. Yes.
Dr. Why is that?
Well, because we're able to, if people are vaccinated and wear their masks, there's no need for lockdown.
Now, remember, this is the same president who said that he was against vaccine mandates, and he now says that the unvaccinated are the cause of the pandemic, so now he's for mandates. You cannot take his no lockdown talk with a grain of salt, though. I do want to focus today on the fact that Biden has banned people from flying to America from 8 African nations. Now, because Democrats do not comprehend any sort of irony at all whatsoever and don't care if they're hypocrites, you recall Democrats said travel bans literally just like this. And by Democrats, I mean Joe Biden. 1 year ago, Joe Biden said travel bans like Joe Biden's travel ban right now is racist. Remember, at the start of the Wuhan Xi virus, the Xi variant, which we now know was created in a lab in communist China, and it first began spreading across the world in January. Actually, it started technically in 2019. Well, Democrats, led by Joe Biden, said that it was racist to stop any kind of flight from China or anywhere else. In fact, he said we should do quite the opposite. We should run down and get into a big old crowd of people and celebrate the Chinese New Year. They literally said this, and then they did it. Watch.
To everyone, you should come to Chinatown. Precautions have been taken by our city. We know that there's a concern about tourism traveling all throughout the world, but we think it's very safe to be in Chinatown and hope that others will come.
Yes, banning flights from China was called literally, quote, xenophobic and also racist. And last year, Joe Biden couldn't resist a chance to accuse Donald Trump of racism when Orange Man Bad banned flights from certain countries in Africa. He had tweeted, quote, Trump further diminished the U.S. in the eyes of the world by expanding his travel ban. This new, quote, Africa ban is designed to make it harder for Black and brown people to immigrate to the United States. It's a disgrace, and we cannot let him succeed, end quote. Well, now that Joe Biden is president, it's apparently fine to bar Black and brown people from immigrating to the United States from Africa to stop a virus. And Vice President Kamala Harris is all for barring them too. I mean, after all, she's used to throwing Black people behind bars for minor pot violations, so this is no different in her mind. Now, this is the same Joe Biden that made this racist statement, quote, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black, end quote. So when you're a Democrat, you can pretend that everyone you don't like is a racist while you actually get to be a racist. Weird how that works. Now, let's recall, according to Democrats, not only was it racist to ban people from coming to America from Africa when Trump did it, Joe Biden also wanted you to know it was totally ineffective in stopping the virus anyway. It wouldn't accomplish a darn thing, he said. Here's what Joe Biden tweeted on March 12th of 2020, quote, a wall will not stop the coronavirus. Banning all travel from Europe or any other part of the world will not stop it. This disease could impact every nation and any person on the planet, and we need to plan to combat it, end quote. So banning travel from certain countries won't stop the virus, Biden told us, and it's racist to do so anyway. Can you imagine like old Biden talking to now older Biden? So here's another take on how racist Trump's travel bans were from our vice president, Kamala Harris, who tweeted this, quote, Trump's extended un-American travel ban undermines our nation's core values, and it's clearly driven by hate, not security, end quote. So again, it was racist to ban any travel from any part of the world, but especially Africa, under Trump. But under President Biden and Vice President Harris, it's just sound pandemic mitigation policy. In fact, it's no longer racist at all. Why isn't it racist now to put a travel ban on parts of Africa? That's irrelevant. Who knows? I mean, remember, Biden also told us in a tweet that a wall won't stop the virus, because that's apparently what he actually thought someone suggested. And banning flights won't stop the virus either. Nothing can stop it, except a face panty worn indoors maybe. But otherwise, the virus is totally unstoppable. Today, thanks to some unexplained mutation, apparently the virus is stoppable by banning immigration and flights into America from Africa. Now, why is this true now, but not before? That answer is that Democrats will take any position that serves their agenda at any given moment, even if that position is an absolute cracktastic contradiction. Here's Circle Back Jen Psaki just a little earlier today trying to explain this contradiction and hypocrisy. This is her job. Watch.
Before Joe Biden was president, he said that COVID travel restrictions on foreign countries were hysterical xenophobia and fear-mongering. So what changed?
Well, I would say first, to put it in full context, Peter, what the president was critical of was the way that the former president put out, I believe, a xenophobic tweet and how he called what he called the coronavirus and who he directed it at. The president has not been critical of travel restrictions. We have put those in place ourselves. We put them in place ourselves in the spring. But no, he does not believe. He believes we should follow the advice of health and medical experts. That's exactly what he did in putting in place these restrictions over the weekend.
So two really quick things. First off, it's weird because he didn't do that, because right before he announced, in fact, 2 hours and 20-something minutes before he actually announced that they were going to have a ban on flights, you had Anthony Fauci, who was going on television saying, absolutely not, there isn't going to be a ban on any flights. We don't have enough data yet, which is actually a weird statement by itself. But Fauci briefed Joe Biden that exact same morning, and then 2 hours and 20-something minutes later, Joe Biden comes out and says, we're going to have a travel ban. So what? Also, the whole thing with it was the way that he tweeted it. It was the way that he tweeted and the words that he used. That's not what Joe Biden said. He specifically said in his tweet, along with Kamala Harris, that it was a ban on flights. It was a ban on migration, right, or immigration from Black and brown people coming from Africa. That's exactly what he said verbatim. So no, the internet exists, and we can actually see what he typed out with his own two thumbs on his phone. So why is Joe Biden suddenly doing this very racist, evil thing to brown and Black people by banning South African flights into America? Because of that very scary, very frightening, very alarming, no good, very bad variant called Omicron or Omicron or Omicron, depending on if you're Biden. I need a little echo on that when I say its name. I repeat, Omicron, it's coming. So what is it exactly? Nobody knows. Like that, what is coming? Nobody knows. Biden doesn't know anything about Omicron because he can't even say it, and nobody also knows anything about Omicron. I mean, who knows? Yet the world must grind to a halt. That's what's important here, people. Everything must stop, and you must freak out. And to do that, we have to institute formerly racist, but no longer racist, African bans on travel to the United States. And we must prepare for an Omicron variant that nobody knows anything about, or Omicron. Are you following? No? It's okay. No one else is either. It's Monday and Democrats are crazy, so you can be forgiven if you're lost. Not as lost as Biden. If you are that lost, then you need help. But there is just one man to turn for guidance. Dr. Full of himself, Anthony Fauci. He somehow still has a job. And here he is. I mean, actually defining Chief Quack, talking about the Omicron variant that nobody knows anything about. But we should prepare for the worst, he says. Watch.
We just really need to, as I've said so often, prepare for the worst. And it may not be that we're going to have to go the route that people are saying. We don't know a lot about this virus, so we want to prepare as best as we can, but it may turn out that this preparation, although important, may not necessarily push us to the next level. People talking about lockdowns, people talking about that. Let's see what the information that we're getting in real time tells us, and we'll make decisions based on the science and the evidence the way we always do.
How do you prepare for something that you don't know anything about? I mean, it could be bad, like we all could die. So we're going to prepare for that. But it may also not be all death, and we don't know. That's what he says, Dr. Frankenvirus Fauci. Lockdowns may not even be necessary. He's waiting for the science to come in, and the science will guide us. Isn't that his nickname for himself? And Dr. Fauci is science itself, as you know. So when he says the science will guide us, he's talking about himself. He's the captain now. He's the science. Now, again, if you're confused about all of this, let me help you understand what's happening. Like I said earlier, everything that we see from Democrats, every position, every lie, every hoax, every policy that's done that they create, it's about advancing control. That's all this is about. Now, the problem with them wanting to control you is that it's clear as day to everyone, apparently except for some of them, that Democrats are utterly incompetent. They can't even control their own lives or their libido, much less your life. I mean, for crying out loud, Anthony Weiner, everyone. When your last name's Weiner, don't send pictures of it. See, the United States feels like it's on the verge of collapse in less than 10 months under Joe Biden. Democrat partisan Dr. Fauci, he's actually completely failed the American public, and nobody trusts him or his disastrous U.S. mitigation strategies and his China enabling, CCP enabling. So what do you do when you fail to control a pandemic as you promised? In fact, you've had more fatalities this year than like all of last year, and you've created a supply chain disruption, hyperinflation, and an energy crisis. You go and get yourself one of them there exotic variants are real quick. Any variant's going to do, actually. One from Africa sounds real nice and scary. And whether it's actually dangerous isn't the point. What's important is that it is a much needed, little known about massive distraction. Just give that variant a frightening, scientific-y sounding name. And when the economy fails and the supply chain crisis grows and Bidenflation just is catastrophic, Democrats have a perfect scapegoat. It's that Omicron or Omnicron, whatever. And this variant couldn't have come at a better time for the Biden administration because, after all, playing the Trump card still doesn't work like it used to. I mean, really, seriously, the mean tweeter is looking really attractive after watching Biden bumble and fumble his way through this presidency. I mean, Jimmy Carter, the man who was a peanut farmer that has snowman eyes and unleashed the Shah in Iran, looks compelling at this point. I mean, that's how bad it is. I mean, polls don't lie. Hips and polls, neither of them lie. So on cue, it's time for a new panic. Omicron or Omnicron, whatever. I mean, seriously, Omicron? The only problem is that this variant is not going to live up to the hype. It's early, but so far, in fact, what we hear from all doctors in South Africa, including those who've given interviews to The Guardian, is that they have, the quote was unusual symptoms, but very mild. And that was the actual quote from the doctors who are in South Africa on the front lines treating this. But see, you got legacy media frothing at the mouth about it, and the media they're talking up the fear while telling us nothing factual about any of this. So for now, just wear your mask indoors at all times, even in the shower, even if the president doesn't. But here's what we do know about the Omicron variant. According to doctors in South Africa, we need to tone down the hysteria. You know, one of those doctors I was talking about, this woman is the head of the South African Medical Society, Dr. Angelique Kotisi. Watch.
Looking at the mildness of the symptoms that we are seeing, currently there's no reason for panicking as we don't see severely ill patients. The hype that's been created currently out there in the media and worldwide doesn't correlate with the clinical picture.
So why are we freaking out about the Omicron variant? Because it's a distraction. And our administration needs one of those. But some other possible reasons to consider: this administration and the CDC and the NIH and the NIAID, they're hell-bent on vaccinating everyone down to babies, probably next fetuses. The problem is that millions of parents already aren't buying the need to jab their 5 to 11-year-olds, and they're pushing back. And also, Africa is largely unvaccinated, at just 10% of all Africans having been jabbed just once. Now think about what you're being told. The Omicron variant has mutated from where? Oh, largely unvaccinated Africa? How convenient. And the Omicron hype is coming right as a significant pushback against vaccine small children is gaining steam all over the world, and including the United States. So maybe it's time to turn the fear dial to 11. Again, this is not to say that the variant isn't real. I mean, viruses all have mutations, but it's worth thinking about the convenient narratives that are formed around it. And it's instructive to notice all of the fear-mongering and hype from the media before much is even known about this variant. So why is Legacy Press hyping this variant that they admit that they don't know anything about? Because they're moving in lockstep. This is about control. And that agenda, as I said, all about control over you. Fear is a useful tool in convincing people to give up their rights and their way of life. And the pandemic has become an excellent scapegoat for the administration. They can blame their disastrous presidency on Delta and now maybe even this new variant. And soon they'll be blaming the Omicron wave, if it materializes, on the unvaccinated again. But don't worry, Pfizer says, they'll have a vax for this variant, a variant that may or may not be very dangerous within 3 months. So there's a profit angle too, all of which means perhaps the only pandemic we're actually caught in now is a pandemic of fear, an endless loop of variants and scapegoating and hype that's proven to be too useful and too profitable for too many, especially for an administration imploding right before America's eyes. So coming up, we've got more on this with Dr. Joel Zinberg, health policy expert for the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Stay with us. Thanks to Biden's economic policies, which we've talked about every day for weeks on end, job numbers are still abysmal and inflation is still skyrocketing. And still, instead of still following the former president's pro-business agenda that had the economy booming, Biden still wants to tax corporations and still pass trillion-dollar bills that we still can't pay for. So still, it's time for you to take proactive steps to protect your wealth in retirement by investing in gold and precious metals, and Legacy Precious Metals can help. Washington continues to still keep printing money to pay for their outrageous bills, but all that does is still devalue your dollar. Gold offers a hedge against inflation, and as the dollar gets weaker, gold gets stronger. Legacy Precious Metals are the gold standard when it comes to investing in precious metals, and they have a team of experts who can counsel you on the best options for you and your family. So don't leave your retirement to chance. Call Legacy Precious Metals at 866-580-2088. Visit them online, download their free investor's guide, bunch of information in there, legacypminvestments.com. Welcome back. So did you know that science now apparently has a representative? Science is no longer studies and observations. Science is now a physical organization with an avatar. Just ask that avatar, Dr. Fauci. Watch.
Anybody who spends lies and threatens and all that theater that goes on with some of the investigations and the congressional committees and the Rand Pauls and all that other nonsense, that's noise, Margaret. That's noise. I know what my job is. Anybody who's looking at this carefully realizes that there's a distinct anti-science flavor to this. So if they get up and criticize science, nobody's going to know what they're talking about. But if they get up and really aim their bullets at Tony Fauci, well, people could recognize there's a person there, so it's easy to criticize. But they're really criticizing science because I represent science.
I think actually they were criticizing his knowledge and participation in helping to fund gain-of-function research. Let's talk to somebody who actually knows a thing or two about science and get their actual scientific perspective. Joining me now is Dr. Joel Zinberg, health policy expert of the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Dr. Zinberg, thank you so much for being here. I wanted to get your kind of thoughts on the way that this Omicron variant is, I guess, the response to it by the federal government and by all of these other, medical departments, the response that's being rolled out to this. I mean, we're told, at least, I appreciate the honesty up to the point from our elected officials and some of these other folks that, well, they don't really know anything about it. But I'm not quite sure why they're talking about boosters and vaccines when WHO is already on record saying that nothing that they have by way of vaccine is actually going to work or respond to this new variant. What is your take on this?
Well, on the one hand, they're being appropriately cautious. They're saying this has a lot of mutations. Some of them are dangerous mutations that have been associated with earlier variants. We don't know how they'll manifest themselves in this new variant, the Omicron. However, on the other hand, some of the reactions from state and federal government officials have been really way over the top. Like the New York's Governor Hochul has imposed an emergency mandate and is now going to threaten to take over the hospitals and various health mandates that really may or may not be necessary. But at the point we're at, where there have been no cases in New York State, no cases in the United States that anyone's aware of at any rate, and no one knows whether or not this is going to be more transmissible more virulent or whether it will escape natural or vaccine immunity, those sorts of things are a bit over the top. Just as, some might argue that the travel ban on South Africa is a bit over the top. After all, this is, back in spring of 2020 when we really knew nothing about coronavirus, and we had no types of therapeutics, no vaccines. People criticized the Trump administration for imposing a travel ban. But now we're in a situation where we know a lot more, we have a lot more options, and most importantly, we can readily test for the infection. Now they're imposing a travel ban, and no one seems at all worried about that.
Yeah, and to your point, Dr. Zinberg, when we talk about what we know and what we don't know, I think the only information that we've been able to get up till this point, I played some audio of Dr. Angelique Katizi, who is in South Africa, on the head of the medical society there, saying that the symptoms are unusual, I guess, compared to what we know from existing coronavirus symptoms. Like they're apparently, like, smell and taste aren't affected, but there are some other unusual symptoms. But she said that it's mild, and it's odd that we wouldn't have that conversation or have information about that from our either elected officials or, bring back the task force, put the task force up there and have people answer questions, because I always found that so much more informative when you just had medical professionals up there answering questions that reporters were asking for their readers. What are your thoughts on exploring that and that information, and maybe bringing the task force up to answer questions? We haven't seen them in a long time.
Well, at today's news conference, or if you can actually dignify it with that word, since, as you, President, even called on a specific list of prepared reporters, he did defer to Dr. Fauci at various points, and Dr. Fauci made a few comments. So, there's some element of what you're asking for. And frankly, what the president said actually was welcome, in the sense that he said, this is something for concern, but not panic. And that's precisely what, where we're at now. We don't know very much about this. There's really nothing to indicate that the vaccines won't work against this variant as they have against all previous variants. Perhaps it won't be, at 90% effective at preventing serious disease and death, but even if it's only 80% effective, that's still pretty darn good. So it remains to be seen. But Dr. Kotze's remarks were that this was unusual because people had mild cases and atypical symptoms, which is good. So it means that we may not have such a severe problem. On the other hand, she did acknowledge that most of her patients were younger people who normally have less severe cases. So it remains to be seen how it's going to play out in the more vulnerable people, like the elderly.
Do you think that the variant, it almost seems like a rhetorical question, but do you think that it's possibly already here?
It very well may be, simply because people have been traveling, for weeks, the last few weeks, from around the world. There are now 3 reported cases in Canada, at least 2 of them, and I think perhaps all 3 are recent travel from Africa. And I'm sure we've had people traveling from Africa or who've come from Europe, but were previously in Africa. So it's very possible it's here, but it may be here in very small numbers. And the good news is we are living in a society now where about 60% of people are fully vaccinated, another 10% of people are partially vaccinated. You have hundreds of millions of people with natural immunity. So a new variant is going to have a much harder time finding a foothold here than previous variants have. And at the moment, the most common variant is the Delta variant, which is the most common variant because it's outcompeted all the others. So this is going to have to be some sort of super duper variant to outcompete Delta.
You brought up a very interesting point, because we have a significant number of people who are vaccinated now. And I think everyone knows, that you have a list of comorbidities that might make you a little bit more susceptible to experiencing more severe symptoms. Why is it that we seem to have higher fatality rates with higher vaccination? And it's still, and I know that there are breakthrough cases, but why? Can you talk a little bit to that? Because that's a question that I know is floating out there. A lot of people discussing it, but I don't see it really I don't see people diving into it on cable news discussions.
Well, we don't really have higher fatality rates than we had in the past. The fact is the fatality with COVID is very closely linked, very closely correlated with advancing age. So people below age 18, fatality is practically unheard of. And it starts when you get to about age 25, you're at like 0.02% infection mortality rate. When you get to age 55, you're at 0.4%. It's only when you get to 65 and older that you really get into frightening figures. And that's been the case from the very start. But of course, the good news is that we have about 90% of people in this country about 65 and older are fully vaccinated. So, we have a pretty well protected elderly population, and about 20% of those folks have gotten boosted as well.
One of the big hot topics, because now, we're approaching flu season, and it seems like around this time, everybody going home for the holidays, we would always have discussions about flu shots and et cetera. Anyway, now, of course, everyone's discussing whether they're getting vaccinated or they're getting boosters. What can you tell us about to what degree children can be transmitters, or because I know in the very beginning, one of the things that I remember, and I think it was actually Dr. Birx who had said this during one of the coronavirus task force meetings, that children, because of their physical development, the point of their physical development, they can't actually be, and this is not I'm not a doctor, so you'll probably have to sift through this as best you can, but they're not technically, they're not good carriers or transmitters of this virus due to their respiratory system, et cetera. Has that changed with any of the variants, and to what degree are they at this point potential carriers or transmitters of this virus?
Well, from the start, children appear to have been getting much milder cases of COVID. Sometimes it's been shorter lived, so they remain infectious for a shorter period of time. And as time has gone on and the older people in our population have been vaccinated, children are the largest reservoir of unvaccinated people in the society. So they're now sort of particularly vulnerable to infection, but it has not changed in the sense of them having severe disease or needing hospitalization or death. You're seeing, it seems like a higher percentage now, but that's basically because they are the unvaccinated now largely. The adult population is much more highly vaccinated. It's only now that the emergency use authorizations have extended down to age 5 that children have the opportunity to be vaccinated.
One last question for you, Doctor, and I appreciate your time today. I was looking at some of the classifications for traveling, because that's, obviously a big determination, and we were talking about travel bans just a minute earlier. It seems kind of smart to me when I look at the different classifications, like so EU, they have their digital vaccine cards, and they have 3 categories, whether it's number 1, vaccinated, 2, COVID recovered, and 3, tested COVID negative. It doesn't seem like everyone is implementing that, these 3 options. And some people are saying, I know some countries have said, it doesn't matter if you've already had it, if you've, contracted it naturally, as opposed to government or vaccine induced, those antibodies. What is your take on approaching travel using that kind of guideline, like the negative or recovered, or whether or not they've had the injection? What is your take on that?
Well, the CDC all along has been, for some reason that remains unclear to me, resistant to acknowledging the reality that natural immunity exists. And when they do get around to publishing studies or reviews of the evidence, they say that actually natural immunity exists, and it appears to be about as powerful as vaccine immunity. So why they won't acknowledge that in some of these mandates and in some of these travel requirements is sort of remains a mystery to me. And we already have in place a situation by CDC order that travelers to the United States have to demonstrate negative test within 3 days of their departure for the United States if they are not vaccinated, or if they have proof of vaccination within 1 day. So we already have a system in place that should catch, most of the vaccine, the people who have active cases of COVID. And, from those countries that we're concerned about, like the Southern African countries, we could institute something, and rather than banning flights completely and stigmatizing some of the folks from that part of the world and discouraging them from reporting vaccine outbreaks in the future, we could just require that they take a rapid test when they land, in addition to all those other precautions. So, what's peculiar here is you have an administration that a year ago was criticizing the Trump administration for xenophobia when they imposed vaccine mandates at a time when there was very little you could do about it other than impose, not vaccine mandates, but imposing travel bans. Imposing travel bans, there was very little you could do. Now you can do a lot of things, but they don't seem to want to impose them. And you had Chief of Staff Ron Klain complain a year ago that it wasn't a travel ban, it was a Band-Aid because we were only applying the ban to non-U.S. citizens. But that's precisely what they're doing with this travel ban. U.S. citizens and green card holders are not going to be subjected to the ban. So it's a thing that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and it sort of falls into the panic response that the president said he didn't want to follow today, rather than a measured scientific response.
That's a very good point. There's consistency makes credibility, and a lot of people don't put faith in what they see when they see an absence of consistency and a undermining of credibility as a result of that. Dr. Zinberg, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. So coming up, the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, they've changed their guidance as it relates to transgender and intersex athletes and the regulation of their participation in sports. So wait until you hear the details. Steve McConkey, president of 4 Winds USA, a worldwide sports ministry, joins next to discuss. Black Rifle Coffee develops their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus they've learned as military members. Being founded and operated by veterans, Black Rifle Coffee knows what a quality cup of coffee means to active duty troops who are away from home for the holidays. Black Rifle Coffee is therefore committed to supporting all who serve. With every purchase you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. And this November, all month long, which is like a couple more days, every purchase you make, a bag of their limited edition roast will be sent to service members overseas for Christmas delivery. So help support the cause. Visit blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV and check out the freshest coffee in America. blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV gets you 20% off coffee, apparel, gear, plus 20% off the first month of the coffee club. Welcome back. The woke infiltration of the world's institutions has been nonstop over the past decade. One of the most recent examples is when we saw a biological man who's competed before as a man for decades participate in the Tokyo Olympics over the summer as a woman and actually disenfranchised a woman, an indigenous woman from from New Zealand, from even competing and having that slot on the team. This prompted IOC, the International Olympics Committee, to announce a new framework for transgender athletes. So there's a lot to it. Let's discuss it now. Joining me is Steve McConkey, president of 4 Winds USA, which is a worldwide sports ministry. Steve, thank you for being here. I'm not quite sure what regulation the IOC could impart on any of these, on any discipline, any sports discipline at all whatsoever, considering that some of the people who are competing, these are people who went through puberty as males. They benefited from the muscle mass, the denser bone structure. I mean, especially for certain sports, the way that, the hip formation, I could go on and on and on, the way that they are structured, which is definitely an absolute biological scientific advantage over women, no matter how much testosterone inhibiting whatever they take. So how does the IOC plan to offset that? I mean, they can't change the rules of science.
No, they can't. In 2003, I was in Duluth, Minnesota, and way back in the paper, they had an article, a very 3-paragraph article saying they're going to allow transgenders in the Olympics. So we started taking it on back then in 2003. And then in 2000, at that time, you had to have sex reassignment surgery and hormone therapy. And now what they do is they have, in 2015, they said they'd do just hormone therapy. And just last Tuesday, now they say they're not going to test at all testosterone. This is very unfair. Women will be displaced in competition. There's no doubt about it.
It's the end of women's sports as we know it. I mean, with some of these individuals, if women had naturally occurring levels of hormones in their body that men who identify as women have in theirs at the time of competition, those biological women would be disqualified, would they not?
Yes, and what you got to remember is that the average for a woman is 2, I don't want to get real scientific, 2 nanomoles of testosterone. And for a man, it's 9 and above. So what they did with intersex and transgender athletes, they allowed them to go to 10. And then what we tried to do is get them to go down to 5. And so what they did last week is eliminate testosterone test altogether. This is like people going in playing darts in the dark. And what's going to happen is these darts are going to start hitting the people that do the policies. I think this is going to come back to bite them big time.
Yeah, I can't imagine I mean, not only this does more than change women's sports. I mean, it really, it does disenfranchise women because it's going to be impossible for women to compete like with Laurel Hubbard. Laurel Hubbard took the spot that a woman competitor would have had on that team and ended up going and competing in her place. What I don't understand, Steve, is, when women wanted to do sports, we women, we had our softball leagues, we created our own soccer league, we had our very own leagues separate from men. We didn't force men to try to accommodate, women wanting to play. We had our own leagues and our own competitions, even WNBA. So why is it that you cannot, that transgender athletes will not do the same? I'm curious.
Well, like, for example, I'm probably the only person that's fighting this publicly. I'll never get a Hall of Fame induction no matter what I do. And it's insane. They had 300 scientists in around the world and lobbyists and lawyers and all this stuff influencing the Olympic Committee. And they were trying to say that it's not scientific, that in other words, what I was saying was not scientific. But what they don't realize is what they're doing is they're putting women in a different category now, because what they're going to do is have men beating women. And the strangest thing is the Olympic Committee said that they will no longer disclose who's transgender. So you may not even know. In 2016, I tried to sue the International Olympic Committee to stop the race in 800 meters. I knew that there's 3 intersex athletes in that race, and I was laughed at. The lawyers wouldn't take it on because they didn't have a vested interest. What happened was the intersex athletes in 2016, 800 meters, won gold, silver, and bronze. The women were back crying. They knew they were defeated.
Wow.
And it's a shame.
And, it is, and especially, and as we mentioned a little earlier, it's not like these are individuals who at a young age, which this is not a statement on acceptability of it at all, but it's not as though these individuals at a young age before they went into puberty decided to stop the maturation of themselves as their biological sex. I mean, these are people, like in the case of Laurel Hubbard, this is a grown man who competed as a man and was a man for quite a long time before only just recently deciding to identify as female. That benefit of the density of bone structure, the muscle mass, the way that his hips are set, it gives him an amazing advantage over any other female competitor. And that's just weightlifting. I mean, when you look at track and field, when you look at wrestling, I mean, my goodness, mixed martial arts, which is a sport that I follow. And thankfully, UFC hasn't allowed Phelan Fox to go in and beat women in the octagon. I mean, these are all, and Steve, and you've spoken about this, and it's crazy to me that the IOC does not recognize this. So I think the question is, how can this be fair sports that people can even get into anymore, knowing that it's actually unfair and they're not being transparent and it's an unleveled playing field?
Well, what they tried to do, remember in 2015, they said that they were going to do hormone therapy for a year and then the athletes could compete. But the problem with that is you cannot reverse the lung capacity, the bone density, the length of the bones. The muscle structure are set by puberty. Now you have people trying to go into 12, 13-year-olds and down and trying to change that. I sat with Bruce Jenner in 1976 when he set the record in Des Moines, Iowa at the Drake Relays. There were 10 of us sitting with his first wife. And I tell you, I saw that guy perform. He had everything, the looks, the athletic skill, the ability. And then to see him go into what he did, and they used him as an advocate. And the Olympic Committee in 2003, when I was fighting it, they used it as advocacy. What they did is they passed that so that the high school associations would accept that. And this is what you're seeing. Women are different from men. And no matter what you say, I had Rasmussen do a poll, and they said that 27% of the people supported transgender athletes. Even liberal Democrats know that this is woke, if you can believe that.
Oh, yeah, it definitely. Oh, I can. But they would never have the courage to say it. Not at all. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your advocacy on this and your voice. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you very much. And you can see Madison, Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin in my background, the most liberal campus in the United States. They tried to kick me out of here, but the Lord has a different plan. Well, thank you very much.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, coming up, Secretary Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Transportation Secretary, has one of the worst suggestions, I think, as it relates to electric vehicles. We'll tell you what he said on the other side. And personal news on a new book of mine, my 4th book, launched today. We'll discuss. Keep it here. Every American is blessed to live in a country founded squarely on the idea that we're free, and many take that gift for granted and labor under the misconception that our liberties are forever guaranteed. Freedom is not a given. You have to exercise it, and that's why now is the best time to support free speech and the voices that fight back. So as a supporter of the First, you get premium content from hosts you know and love, like me, and access to TV specials, exclusive emails, and other membership benefits from the hosts, and enjoy weekly specials on demand through the website and the First TV app. So join the exclusive Facebook community that will never censor you. Video calls, chats with the host, access to members-only inbox where you can share your thoughts, ideas, questions, and a premium live access from events across the country. Sign up today and you get 20% off the first year of your annual subscription. Becoming a First TV supporter is easy. Just visit thefirsttv.com to subscribe today and save 20%. You have homeowners insurance for a good reason, because without it, a fire, flood, or burglary could destroy you financially. But there's another major crime that your homeowner's policy doesn't cover, and it's called home title fraud. Law enforcement calls title fraud one of the fastest growing crimes, and it can ruin you financially. You need Home Title Lock. Title fraud happens when a criminal forges your signature on a document stating that you sold your home. Then they can take out loans against your home and leave you with payments. You'll spend a fortune in legal fees trying to prove that you didn't commit fraud. Home Title Lock puts a barrier around your home's title, and the instant they detect anyone from a cyber thief to a renter or relative trying to forge their way on your home's title, they help shut it down. Visit HometitleLock.com, register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim, and enter code radio for 30 free days of protection. Secretary Mayor Pete Buttigieg is back from his paternity leave that he took during a supply chain crisis that he could not be bothered about. His latest transportation tip for the average American is if you buy one of those really expensive electric cars, you'll never again have to worry about the price of gas. Watch.
There is more envisioned in the Build Back Better law. I'll give you one example. It contains incentives to make it more affordable to buy an electric vehicle, up to a $12,500 discount in effect for families thinking about getting an EV. Families that once they own that electric vehicle will never have to worry about gas prices again.
Yeah, it's like a cost exchange for cost. That's like saying, I just used this credit card to pay off this credit card debt. I don't have any debt now. Yay. How are they going to make super expensive electric cars cheap and affordable for the average American? I mean, by making the average American subsidize them, of course, because see, with your tax dollars, the government then will return your money to you by paying you up to $12,500 to buy an electric vehicle. So the federal government is going to, well, they're talking about handing every buyer of an EV a refund of $12,500 to incentivize them to go electric. And the American taxpayer, all of us, will have to pay for it. Now, never mind that electric cars are not even in any way environmentally friendly. I've written a lot about this and have talked a lot about it over the past decade. Most electricity, and by most I mean over 86% that we charge electric cars with, comes actually from coal-burning plants and natural gas plants. In fact, 64% of electricity comes all from, coal-fired plants, these two fossil fuel sources. Very little, if any, comes from renewable energy sources like solar, which generates maybe almost 1% of electricity in the U.S. And never mind that the environmental impact of all those millions of EV batteries. I mean, first off, have you seen a lithium mine? Have you seen a cobalt mine? Have you seen what happens to batteries that are no longer useful? And also they're very expensive to replace. These are batteries that end up in landfills, and put aside the strip mining toll on the environment for that extraction of all those rare earth elements for these batteries. But you don't have to worry about the price of a gallon of gas, says Mayor Pete. And that's good, because it seems like the Biden administration intends to drive the price so high they'll bankrupt the fossil fuel industry and the American consumer while they're at it. Okay, so finally, some personal news today. This is where I love grabbing things off camera. I wrote a kid's book. This is my 4th book. This one's a children's book, and it's all about helping kids understand the Second Amendment. It launched today. Our kids are constantly told by the media and celebrities that guns kill people, but the truth is, people illegally carrying and illegally using inanimate objects, statistically, according to every FBI uniform crime report, they kill people. In fact, Guns save lives. Defensive gun usage vastly outweighs and outmeasures that of criminal usage. So I teamed up with Brave Books and wrote a book for kids called, you might remember the title, sounds a little familiar, Paws Off My Cannon. So the quick synopsis, the story follows Bongo, who is a daring gorilla, very hungry for cupcakes. I also love cupcakes. Cupcakes are amazing. He loves eating food, especially those cupcakes. But one day, hyenas, which are unfriendly dogs that are not cute, shoots a coconut at Bongo and his friend Bonnie. So Bonnie's upset over this misuse of coconut cannons, so she wants the entire village to ban all coconut cannons. Now Bongo, who is intelligent, thinks that hyenas are actually the problem, not the cannons. So their whole debate splits Mushroom Village, which is a part of the whole Freedom Island. You're going to want to read the thing. So you'll see if Bongo and Bonnie finally see eye to eye or whether or not one side prevails, right? Also, I make an appearance in this book. I'm not going to tell you where, but you'll know it. I'm excited about it because our kids rarely hear both sides of any argument when it comes to the Second Amendment. And today only, using code DANA, you can get 20% off. Give me a moment here because this is big. This is a big giant box. 20% off what's called the treasure, it's that heavy, the treasure chest set. And it includes my book, and it also includes the first 6 books of the Brave series, which covers a whole range of topics. They're actually all at the bottom of here, and they're all very nicely wrapped up. Talks about protecting the unborn, gender identity, anti-communism, which we love, and more. You also get the poster of Freedom Island and the map with character and flag stickers. It's an awesome workbook for understanding freedoms and games and more. Now, 20% off using code DANA. We'll get you 20% off this. Now, after today, you get 10% off the treasure chest set using code DANA. Only 5,000 of these things were made, and they're already going fast because they've already checked with the folks at Brave. Now, we're selling them directly from Brave because there's literally no way in today's culture that these books are going to be sold through like Barnes & Noble without cancel culture interfering. You know that's going to happen, or them getting pulled from Amazon. So, very excited about it. The book is Paws Off My Cannon. You can get the book by itself, or you can get the treasure chest set and get it in time for Christmas. It's a great gift. I have links all over my social media and on my newsletter over at Substack. So very excited about this. And I hope that you love it and your kids love it and your grandkids love it and your nieces and nephews love it. Buy it for your friends' kids. Buy it for random kids that you don't even know. Because believe me, they need the knowledge and reason. So that does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night and don't bend the knee.